could have been the worst air disaster in the U.S., but it was narrowly averted. That and the Nepal ATR crash on this episode of Taking Off. Hi, I'm Dan Milliken, and we're going to talk about the near miss of the two jumbo jets at JFK and the tragedy in Nepal. I'm here at the Fort Worth Flight School, and we're training some new pilots in an intense week, so we're going to get this out fast. I'd like to thank our sponsors. Without them, we can't do this. And you guys watching, on behalf of Christy, Bailey, and myself, thanks. We just passed 70,000 on YouTube. And I hope you can join us and subscribe as well. Okay, now for the sad news out of Nepal. On January 15th, a Yeti airline ATR 72-500 crashed with 69 fatalities so far and 3 unaccounted for from the 72 known occupants. The airplane was on final approach to a new airport in the center of Nepal, and the video shows what looks like a low and slow stall spin. But investigators will look at that more. And Juan Brown over at Blanco Lirio has a great in-depth examination of what we know so far, and that's the link. This crash just happened, and details will be coming out. And what we do know is that this is the deadliest air crash in Nepal since 1992, and that over 350 people have died since 2000, as the country is the home base for many that travel to attempt to climb Mount Everest and K2 and the other peaks in the Himalayas. The European Union back in 2013 banned Nepali airlines from the European airspace due to safety concerns, and the Nepalese government has formed a panel to investigate, and a report is expected in 45 days. They have recovered the black box and the flight data recorder. The plane was 15 years old, and one report stated it had an older transponder with unreliable data. The ATR is a twin-engine turboprop built by Airbus in a joint venture with Italy's Leonardo. Very sad day in Nepal. What could have been a very sad day in the United States was narrowly averted on January 13th at New York's JFK airport. For some background, the world's deadliest air crash ever occurred in Tenerife in the Canary Islands on March 27, 1977, when two Boeing 747s collided on the runway in fog on the Spanish island. A KLM was taking off and a Pan Am was turning off the runway to a taxiway. The KLM tried to pull up and over but failed. Everyone on the KLM 747 was killed, and most of the people on the Pan Am. 583 people died and only 61 survivors. Lots of links in the chain led to this disaster. And fortunately, on January 13th, a few days ago, a link was broken and a similar fate averted. It was 8:45 p.m. local in New York, and American Airlines 777, Flight 106 to London Heathrow, I've actually been on that flight as a passenger recently, was cleared to taxi to runway 4 left via Kilo, crossing runway 31.
American 106 Heavy, cross runway 31 left at Kilo.
At that time, takeoffs were occurring on runway 4 left. A Delta Airlines Boeing 737-900 Flight 1943 to the Dominican Republic received takeoff clearance on 4 left and began to roll.
Delta 1943, wind 35018, gust 24, runway 4 left, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, runway 4 left, Delta 1943.
The American Airlines 106 missed the turn to Kilo, instead turned the wrong way onto Juliet, which then led them to cross runway 4 left. That put the Boeing 777 broadside into the oncoming Delta 737. The controller was on the job and immediately canceled the takeoff clearance for the Delta plane, which had to perform a rejected takeoff. Listen to this.
Delta 1943, cancel takeoff clearance. Delta 1943, cancel takeoff clearance.
Rejecting.
The Delta plane stopped 1,000 feet from the American, and often when a rejected takeoff happens, the jet needs to be inspected, as this can stress brakes, tires, and engines. The Delta jet was able to reject the takeoff just in time to miss the American plane, and listening to the tapes, the clearance was clear and repeated back correctly. The American Airlines flight crew turned the wrong way. They were given clearance to cross a runway 31 left, which the flight crew mistakenly took for runway 4 left, getting disoriented in the aircraft during the taxi. Now, as a single pilot in my Cessna, I've gotten a bit turned around before. It's easy to happen. It's one of the reasons commercial airlines have 2 pilots. And this one even had 3, and more on that in a minute. While all the signage and markings might look confusing to non-pilots, it's like learning a foreign language, and the crews have been speaking this language for some time. The runways are marked with big red signs with white letters, and taxiways are marked with yellow and black signs. The flight crew of the American Airlines plane read back the clearance to cross runway 31 left, but for some reason they crossed runway 4 left. After the near miss, the Delta plane went back to the gate. American Airlines Flight 106 departed runway 31 left about 30 minutes later after they had a talk with the tower, and they went across the Atlantic. The Boeing 777 can carry around 300 passengers and crew. We don't have a confirmation of how full that plane was. Delta 1943 had 151 people on board. This could have been a disaster close to the Tenerife level. Now, the potential disaster was averted. What will happen? Well, late on January 15th, the FAA and the NTSB did confirm they're opening an investigation. And for the non-pilots out there, I want to tell you about a system that's designed to promote self-reporting to get anonymous, real read on what's happening to help implement better safety changes and protocol. In the general aviation sector, the FAA got an impartial third-party agency to collect the information, and that agency for the general aviation is NASA. If a pilot messes up, he or she can file an anonymous report on the NASA website. And generally speaking, and I mean generally, the pilot can use this report as a kind of get-out-of-jail-free card with the FAA. And this isn't always the case, and it's usually based on intent. If you didn't mean to mess up, that bodes better than if you intentionally screwed up. Also, you have a time period after the incident in which to report. The airlines in the U.S. have a similar type program called the Aviation Safety Action Program, or ASAP. I've talked to many airline pilots, and they use this program a lot. If a pilot just busts an altitude by a few hundred feet by accident, they will generally file an ASAP report. And the point of these programs is safety. By encouraging self-reporting, the data can be received, reviewed, and flaws or potential safety programs can be implemented. And it somewhat gives you a get-out-of-jail-free card with a lot of conditions. Now back to Flight 106. I have no doubt the first thing the flight crew did after landing was file an ASAP report. Best case, the ASAP report is received and the pilots get a slap on the wrist, a don't do that again situation. No harm, no foul. Worst case is action taken against the flight crew, the airline, or anyone else involved in this incident. Because of the no harm, no foul situation, it's possible the FAA doesn't investigate deeply, but they and the NTSB have opened an investigation. They might take a look at the CVR recording on the 777, which records, by the way, a longer loop than the old 2 or 3 hour deal popularized in movies. The internal communication between the flight crew can be scrutinized. And another interesting fact is that American Airlines Flight 106, the flight over the Atlantic, typically carries a third flight crew on the flight deck as part of the team, and not just someone hitching a ride in the jump seat. This is the relief pilot for this flight, and during takeoff and landing, they are in the cockpit as part of the team. I have confirmed there was this third pilot on American Airlines Flight 106 deck, which then brings the question, how did 3 pilots mess this up? That will be the question the NTSB and the FAA want to answer, and I don't know what they'll find. But I recalled a story I read last week on one of the main news sites, and American Airlines released a major revision to their ops manual on cockpit procedures on January 3rd, 11 days before this incident. The union representing the American Airlines pilots was pretty upset that the company basically dropped this on the pilots without adequate time to review or train the new procedures, basically about a month before. And after a bit of a fuss, the company allowed the pilots that they could somewhat mix and match the old and new together until the new operations could be totally implemented. And the pilot union said in a press release that the new operation manual runs the risk of dramatically eroding margins of safety. American Airlines claims that the new changes are all part of a safety initiative. And what these new changes entail include switching some of the roles and responsibilities between the captain and the first officer during things like checklists and communications, while they're taxiing, at the gate, when they're taking off. And I'm not saying this was a factor in this near miss, but I do find the timing interesting. Maybe it was a link in the chain. There could have been other links in the chain, and the FAA and the NTSB will certainly be looking for them. And fortunately for all, ATC and the tower broke the chain and no one was harmed. And I'm hoping that everyone, the companies, the unions, the pilots, and certainly the passengers, want safe travel, and really, that's the bottom line. That's it for today's aviation news. Thanks again to our sponsors, Flying Eyes, where our code, taking off, all caps one word, will get you 10% off. Colton Mortgage, coltontakingoff.com. Marshall Protective Services, MPS Protects. ClemensInsurance.net, and TailwindWaymakers.org. If you haven't seen Christie's report on the John Denver crash, check that out right here. And remember, superior judgment trumps superior skills. You guys stay safe.